Hi guys. So Hamilton is drowning in debt, and so is Tauranga, and so is Queenstown. The cities that have been growing the fastest are also the cities that are drowning in debt the fastest. The flawed model that more people means more rates revenue is the most naive and childlike way of thinking that most New Zealand councils and the New Zealand government have been following for many years now. They think that just pouring more people in will make everything better. Obviously, more people does mean more rates revenue, but this way of thinking completely ignores the added expense that more people creates. More people puts enormous pressure on existing infrastructure and services, all of which cost an enormous amount of money to bring up to the newly required level. All you have to do is look at the gridlocked traffic in many cities now, as roads are just not built to handle the extra capacity. And as we all know, roads in New Zealand are not cheap. So what are the local people getting from this massive intake of newcomers? Yay! Well, if they're a homeowner, they may see higher house prices, which makes many of them feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but it is just an illusion. Unless they own several properties, they are in fact going backwards, and the higher rates certainly helps with that. And what do renters get? Well, nothing good, I'm afraid. They get higher rents, and along with homeowners, all they all really get is more competition for dwindling jobs, longer hospital waits, more congestion, longer commutes, underfunded community services, higher parking fees, less green space, and a busier everything. Once again, the only winners are the property developers and landlords, which is funny really when you think about it, with so many in Parliament being landlords themselves, but that's purely a coincidence surely. So can somebody please tell me how any of this is progress? Surely the council's job is to make the lives of its existing inhabitants better. Is that not what they're for? Hamilton City Council's debt is already tipped to be $1.2 billion this financial year, and that is up from $400 million in 2019. Imagine that, a debt of $1.2 billion for a population of 192,000 people in the Hamilton region. Now that is ridiculously large, guys. Especially when you consider that the council gets its money via rates on each household and not from each person. So with 3.2 people per household, all that 1.2 billion debt is actually spread out over only 60,000 households. So that works out at $20,000 debt per household. Now Hamilton's rates have just gone up again, on average 16.5% this year. But let's face it, that is probably just to help pay off some of the enormous interest payments on that 1.2 billion in debt. Now I do have some sympathy for the Hamilton Council and all other rapidly growing city councils, because they have no control over how many people actually move to their regions. It is the government who is controlling this by having the international migration taps firmly open, whilst they are desperately trying to let as many people into the country as they possibly can, so they can save the housing Ponzi. Although many Kiwi councils are extremely wasteful, they have also been given an impossible situation from a central government who is unwilling to stop the inflow of people. And the crazy thing is, if the central government wants more money, they can just get the RBNZ to print more money and add it to future generations' debt, which they somehow see no problem with. But if the councils want more money, they either have to borrow more from the local government funding agency, the LGFA, or they have to take it from your pocket now as a ratepayer. If they don't do either of these things, then they will go bankrupt, which would open up an enormous Pandora's box of new problems. The LGFA is a government-backed entity, and its primary function is to lend money to local authorities in New Zealand for infrastructure projects and other needs. It does this by issuing debt securities like bonds. Each council is currently able to borrow up to 285% of the specific council's revenue from the LGFA. Hamilton Council's debt-to-revenue ratio is forecast to peak at 276% in 2025-2026. Forecast to peak, let's see how that goes. High-growth councils like Hamilton can apply to borrow up to 350% of their revenue. But for now, Hamilton has decided not to increase their borrowing from the LGFA and have decided to tap into ratepayers just a little bit more instead. Lucky them. Now, the only thing that is guaranteed to stop rates going up as much as they are is if the population stops going up. But that will destroy the Ponzi, And the government is finding it hard to cut that anchor loose, but it needs to happen, because all it is doing is dragging New Zealand down. So thanks for watching, guys. More like this to come. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers for that.